Welcome to the Greatness Together podcast. Curious minds unite. Mother-daughter conversations that delve into the heart of psychology. Thanks for joining us.
Cozy. I was crying out.
What are you singing?
Journey.
What is it? What's the song?
Who's crying now?
I'm not crying.
What love is, what love, na, na, na. What love is crying now.
Oh my gosh, I totally shut you down. I said, I'm not crying. Did you see my reaction? We have this extreme, response to emotions.
I don't feel emotions.
Wow, imagine if you did though. That would be terrible. Imagine if
Not feeling emotions?
Not feeling emotions. Imagine going through a life without feeling emotions.
Isn't that like antisocial personality disorder or something? Where it's like you deviate all the norms. It's like the criminals. All criminals have like antisocial personality. Or narcissists. Or psychopaths. But they more like act on it.
Are we going to spend this whole episode listing really, really terrible people?
Well, my new favorite podcast, other than this one, is called Psychology Unplugged, and the dude talks a lot about like psychological disorders and stuff. So, I'm 8 psychological disorders.
No, you're not.
Just kidding. I am one though. Finger picking. It's called extraroticism disorder or something. I'm like, I don't know if that's a disorder.
I do have to tell you that because you're in psychology, you will find more labels and disorders of you, your friends, and your family. I can only imagine how long the list is of your father and I. It's like medical students. They become hypochondriacs because they can literally diagnose anything. So I think it's very possible it has to do with the current phase you're in your education.
Yeah, I remember our psychological disorder unit in intro to psych or whatever, and I'm like, wow. So I kind of fit a lot of these, but I think they're so broad that everybody does. That's the problem with psychological disorders. There's always overlap and blah, 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 and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah.
But you know what doesn't? It isn't a problem. Is the emotions that we feel. A lot of those disorders are extremes of emotions or the lack of emotions or being able to regulate emotions. Mm-hmm. And ironically, the healthiest adults are the ones that have emotional literacy. And yet you shared this really interesting story when you were volunteering at the women's shelter, working with the kids, and about your reaction when the kids were getting upset.
Yeah, there was a little girl who was like fighting with her sister over a toy or something. And when she couldn't get her way, she just like sat there, not like whining about it, but just like tears rolling down her face. And I looked at her and I was like, wait, this is actually really sad. It's like we're so used to children just like crying to get their way, blah, blah, blah. That's even how babies show their guardians that they are needed something, like they cry. But as they get older, like I think this girl was like 5 or something, like she can use her words, she can communicate and stuff, but there were still these like tears coming down her face, and I'm like, what if it's more than just the attention she's possibly trying to get, or maybe upset that she didn't get her way? Like, what if it's something deeper than that? And it was like sad seeing her like that, because it's like a girl crying, and it wasn't like a whining, like screaming type thing. She was just sitting there silently with these like tears streaming down her face, and I was like, okay, get the toy.
Yeah.
No, I didn't give in, but like then I started thinking like, how, like, what if it's a deeper thing, and how often could we be missing that in like other children, because we're just off the bat think that they're crying for attention, or
We write it off as not a worthy reason.
yeah, we kind of, I even have found myself telling them to like stop crying, like definitely in nicer ways, and it's contextual, but as we get older, we often are told to like express our emotions and say what we think and don't hold back your tears and stuff, but I'm like telling these groups of children to stop crying over like a toy. It's like, what could we be missing while we're just writing off their tears as like attention seeking, for example?
Same
and
with
stuff.
adults. What are we missing, right? What are we missing when we're not curious about people's emotional landscape? Because it's definitely not okay in workplaces for people to be emotional. In fact, I can remember being very overwhelmed at times, working in a hospital. You would hear terrible stories. It would be really devastating. And everyone was expected to contain it. Well, at what cost do you lock it in a vault? And I'm not saying we should all walk around like constantly on the extremes of our emotional cycle. That's not what I mean. And obviously, when we're dysregulated, that's a problem. And I think your question or your reflection of kids is that's what kind of inspired us to do this episode, is at what point do we start to shut off or tell kids to contain themselves? And therefore, what are we missing from them and about ourselves? And to what extent have we not built strong emotional literacy as adults or as teenagers to be able to connect and understand ourselves and each other better?
Yeah, even in terms of like research, like there's not too much research in like youth mental health and stuff, even stuff like psychological disorders, like a lot of early onset symptoms happen in like 20s, or average like around the 20s and stuff.
Yeah.
But there are like cases where they can show up in children. But you don't hear about it too much, and then you blame it for, again, things like attention seeking or like a lack of neurodevelopment and stuff, and it's like, really, how much are we missing?
Yeah.
And
it's kind of like that big picture question is it about the developmental phase, or is it about the situation? We can label it. And as soon as we can put a label to things, then that label makes it nice and neat and tidy. But I think your reflection, and then us having this conversation at the dinner table, made us think about emotions and the role of them and how important they are to us as children and adults on a much broader scale. So I think the question is, for our listeners, are there times where there is an intolerance for emotions, where there isn't a curiosity about what else may be behind a particular reaction, and when a reaction is out of proportion to the situation, or not typical of a developmental phase, or not typical of a life situation, how could that be a really helpful signal to dig in? It just requires us, though, to have a tolerance and enough comfort with emotions. I saw that yawn. Listeners, did you see that yawn?
I did not yawn. Maybe
did not get documented anywhere.
No.
Yeah. No. In all seriousness, it's it does lend itself to a necessary curiosity about what role emotions can have. And even as somebody who, like you, did psychology and family therapy in my master's degree, because being an emotional person is seen as a weakness, even in a healthcare, a healing environment, or in the community, or now as a recognition expert, which has a level of sensitivity in the corporate world, I can't be walking around all emotional all over the place. Wouldn't be taken seriously.
I've even heard of people who've been fired for like crying in the bathroom or something. It's like you really just, I guess you're like the representation of the company or whatever, and it's not seen as good. But yeah, that's not this doesn't build healthy workers. And if you see them crying, ask them what's wrong.
Yeah.
Don't give them a pink slip or whatever.
It's not real to not have emotions, and certain things are very upsetting. So maybe this is a sign that you, as you say, you get to ask questions and be curious. And imagine if we were more curious about what we were going through ourselves, how we might be able to recognize and notice challenges or struggles within ourselves much faster and easier as well. So what, you had shared with me at the dinner table, which I thought was really fascinating. You had shared, what did you say? That, tuning into children and listening to them. Oh gosh, you said something really, really cool. I'm trying to remember what you said.
I said...
Oh, I know what it was. You said, because I wrote it down, it was so good. When a child cries, we ask them to be quiet, but maybe we should ask ourselves to listen.
Yep, I said that.
Well, you did. You say these like brilliant things, and then I'm such a proud mom. I write them down.
Yep.
You say such clever things, and then I'm like, where did that come from? That's those tuition dollars at work.
Yeah, I'm poet at heart, psychologist at
Brain?
toe.
I mean, a
brain,
toe.
Yeah.
Toe brain.
Always just walking towards it.
Yes.
Crab walking.
I see where that's going.
Yeah.
So I think we can invite our listeners to maybe go, if you're really curious about this, go to the episode where we interviewed Dr. Margie Worrell about courage, because she actually, in her book, The Courage Gap, she has this wonderful call for us to experience the full suite of emotions. And she does touch on that, in the importance of leaning into fear and some of the emotions and the experiences that may be more challenging. So I think that would be, if people are fascinated by that, to lean into it more. Simonne, is there anything you would recommend to people who are your age, who are maybe working with or having young children and looking at how they wish to show up in the world that may not be totally tolerant of emotions, but you're like, no, emotions are legit?
I would say, maybe just really listen to not only how listen and notice to how children are responding to different things. Like, I mean, I don't even have too much experience in this in myself, so I can't tell you, like, if they're crying 3 times a day, it means this. If they're
I don't think kids are that formulaic, so that's okay.
Just really pay attention and maybe consider if there's like deeper levels to it. Like
be curious
and even be open to emotions yourself, because then that just creates generations of open and happy children.
And people.
And Pete.
They'll grow up to be adults who are more comfortable with emotions.
Exactly.
And use them in a non-extreme way, maybe.
Yeah, like, don't be an antisocial human and be a criminal.
Wow.
Yeah. Remember
Bobo?
the Bobo doll?
Bobo doll. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone who's like, what's a Bobo doll? It's a first year psychology thing. Reference.
Yeah,
Look it up.
you hit it.
Bandura?
I hit it.
Bandura?
I think so.
Yeah. That's a little fun pop quiz for anybody who is curious. Yes.
Especially
True.
Laura.
True.
Yeah.
True. So thank you, Simonne, because that's a call to action for me as well. The next time I am around a child, how can they be a teacher to me about the non-filtered expression of emotions? And what might that look like in the broader context if we were all a bit more expressive and less filtered? Yes. Thanks for tuning in, listeners. Thanks so much for joining us for the Greatness Together podcast. Never miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you catch your podcasts. Yours in greatness, Simonne and Sarah.